Hey true crime fans! If you're into jaw-dropping stories about love gone wrong, twisted online romances, and shocking crimes that happen behind closed doors, you're in the right place. Hit that subscribe button and join us for new chilling true crime documentaries every single day. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Let's dive in. She was vibrant, just 29, a nurse with a calm spirit, and a future finally taking shape. That night in Palmdale, there were no screams, no struggle. No one saw it coming. Her garage door was open, her car engine still running. Inside a body, face down, motionless. One shot. That was all it took. Not a single neighbor heard a thing. And whoever did it never forced their way in. They walked in like they belonged and vanished without a trace. Before everything fell apart, before the police tape, before the headlines, before the arrest, there was Linnell. Not a victim, not a name in a case file. Just a woman quietly building a life she had worked so hard to deserve. Linnell Barsock was 29 years old, living in Palmdale, California. A registered nurse. A daughter. A friend. The kind of person who didn't need to speak loudly to be heard. She had a steady presence, a calming nature. People noticed it right away. The way she could ease someone's fears with just a look or a word. That wasn't something you could teach. It was who she was. Linnell had been through things too. Like anyone in their late 20s, she had experienced heartbreak, had made mistakes, had questioned her path. But through it all, she kept moving forward. Steady, quietly determined. She'd earned her nursing degree after years of hard work, late nights, and patient care rotations that tested even the strongest spirits. But she didn't complain. She wasn't after money, or titles, or recognition. She just wanted to help. And slowly things were starting to fall into place. She had just started a new job at a hospital in the Antelope Valley. Not a flashy position. But it was stable. Purposeful. She'd recently bought her first home, something modest, but all her own. A quiet neighborhood, a 2-car garage, and enough space to finally breathe. Friends say she was excited about it. Proud. She'd post updates about decorating the place, making it feel warm and safe. A sanctuary she could come home to after long shifts. And then, there was Louis. They were still getting to know each other. He was soft-spoken. Their relationship wasn't perfect, but Linnell seemed hopeful. For the first time in a long time, those closest to her said she was smiling more. There was a calmness to her. A readiness. The pieces of her life were finally aligning. Career, home, love. But none of them knew that someone else was watching all of it unfold. Someone who saw her happiness not as inspiration, but as a threat. The quiet neighborhood of Palmdale was shattered that night, but the silence inside Linnell Barsock's home told a story all its own. The open garage door swung gently in the wind, revealing a car still running, its engine humming faintly in the darkness. Inside, the grim reality settled over the room. Linnell was gone. Detectives quickly arrived on the scene, their eyes scanning for clues that might explain the sudden and violent loss of a young woman with so much left to live for. It didn't take long for suspicion to fall on Louis Benner, Linnell's boyfriend. Their relationship was fresh but intense, marked by passion and, according to friends, moments of unrest. Those closest to Linnell described Louis as quiet, soft-spoken, but sometimes possessive, a man who loved deeply but also struggled with jealousy. Text messages recovered from their phones revealed a complicated dynamic, between tender words of affection and sharp exchanges, moments that hinted at tension simmering just below the surface. In early interviews, Louis's accounts of the night's events contained contradictions, little details that didn't quite match, or timelines that seemed to shift. Police notes from those first hours show investigators growing wary. Questions were asked. Answers were scrutinized. And the picture of Louis became more conflicted, more uncertain. But it wasn't just the inconsistencies. It was the fact that Louis was the man closest to Linnell, someone who knew her daily routines, her fears, and her hopes. In a case like this, investigators often start with those closest to the victim. The boyfriend, the partner, the person who should have been her protector. Would you have suspected Lewis? At first, most did. But as the hours turned to days, the evidence began to reveal a more complex, disturbing reality. The truth was hiding behind carefully constructed lies, and someone else's shadow loomed large over this tragedy. The man they thought was guilty might have been just the first piece of a much larger puzzle. Just as the investigation seemed to be closing in, an unexpected and chilling development arrived. Detectives at the sheriff's department received an anonymous email that would shift the entire case. The sender claimed that Louis Bonheur, Linnell's boyfriend, had confessed to the murder. But it wasn't just the accusation that stunned investigators, it was what came with it. The email contained photographs, pictures of Linnell's body, images so graphic and intimate that they had never been released to the public, or even shared widely among law enforcement. The crime scene was now exposed to a stranger, someone watching from the shadows. Detectives immediately went to work. They examined every detail in the photos, the angle of the shot, the objects in the background, the lighting. Each element became a potential clue, a piece of a puzzle that could lead them to the anonymous sender. But the email wasn't just about evidence. It was a message, a carefully crafted attempt to manipulate the investigation, to throw suspicion squarely on Lewis. Yet whoever sent it had been meticulous, covering their tracks with technical savvy. The email headers showed no clear origin. The sender used encrypted servers and proxies, making the trail nearly impossible to follow. For days, investigators pored over digital records, trying to trace the ghost in the machine. As they worked, the email cast a long shadow over the case. Friends and family of Linnell wrestled with confusion and fear. Could someone so close to her be willing to send such chilling proof to the police? Or was this the work of a stranger? The question haunted the detectives. Who had the access, the knowledge, and the motive to both commit the crime, and then try to manipulate justice through these disturbing photos? And how had they known where Linnell's body lay, in such detail? The answer was buried deep within the digital footprints left behind, if only the investigators could find them. In the digital age, every message, every file, every email leaves behind a trail, sometimes invisible to the untrained eye, but always there. When the anonymous email arrived, it seemed like a confession, a smoking gun aimed at Louis Bonheur. But investigators knew better than to take things at face value. They turned to digital forensics, the science of uncovering hidden clues within the very files themselves. Examining the metadata embedded in the email and its attachments, they began to unravel the sender's carefully constructed deception. Every photo carries more than just an image. It carries a timestamp, a digital fingerprint, clues hidden beneath the surface. Through painstaking analysis, the team traced IP addresses used to send the email, not just once, but through multiple layers of anonymizing servers. What initially looked like a dead end slowly became a trail leading back to a person with access and motive. The timestamps revealed when the images were created and edited, matching timelines only a few could have known. This wasn't just a random act by a stranger or a vindictive enemy. It was someone who knew Linnell intimately, someone who had been close enough to watch, to wait, and then to betray. For the first time, investigators were forced to shift their focus. It wasn't Louis Bonheur, the man who had borne the initial weight of suspicion. It was someone else entirely, someone who had lived in the shadows of Linnell's life, hiding secrets that would soon come to light. The pursuit of justice was no longer straightforward. It was a puzzle with pieces that refused to fit. And every revelation only deepened the mystery. Lauren Austin was more than just Linnell Barsock's roommate. She was her confidant, the person Linnell trusted most in the world, or so it seemed. But beneath the surface of their friendship, secrets festered, secrets that would soon shatter everything. Publicly, they were close friends, sharing an apartment in Palmdale, their lives intertwined by circumstance and choice. But the private reality was far more complex and far darker. During the investigation, police uncovered text messages and conversations that painted a troubling picture. Lauren harbored feelings that went beyond friendship, feelings that Linnell had not fully reciprocated. It became clear that Lauren had been in love with Linnell, a love she kept hidden from most, but never fully let go. These feelings twisted into jealousy, and that jealousy morphed into something dangerous. Friends who spoke to investigators described Lauren as possessive, someone who couldn't stand the idea of Linnell moving on, moving away from her. She watched, waiting, resentful every time Linnell found happiness with someone new. The texts revealed a pattern of control masked as concern, love disguised as obsession. The line between friend and foe had blurred, and Linnell was caught in the middle. This silent struggle played out behind closed doors, hidden from the world, until it erupted into tragedy. What had started as a bond of friendship quietly twisted into a web of betrayal and heartbreak. And at the heart of it was Lauren, someone who didn't just want Linnell's friendship, but wanted to keep her, completely and forever. She didn't want Linnell with anyone else. Ever. That simple phrase, spoken by someone who knew them both, encapsulated the dangerous obsession that would soon lead to murder. By the time the investigation was gaining momentum, Lauren Austin had already vanished without a trace. The woman who had once shared a home with Linnell Barsock was now a ghost on the run. Law enforcement officials scrambled to connect the dots as Lauren slipped through their fingers. She crossed state lines with calculated precision, moving from California to Texas, always staying one step ahead. Travel records and passport stamps traced a deliberate path, not the erratic movements of someone panicked, but the careful escape of someone determined to disappear. Finally, she crossed an international border into Belize, a country far removed from the quiet streets of Palmdale. There, in the tropical shadows, she hoped to start anew, hidden from the grasp of U.S. law enforcement. Surveillance footage and eyewitness accounts provided fleeting glimpses: a woman boarding a bus in hurried silence, a figure weaving through crowded airport terminals. But the world was closing in. Agencies from multiple countries joined forces, sharing intelligence, coordinating efforts to bring her to justice. Wanted posters bearing her image appeared in airports and police stations across continents. News outlets picked up the story, spreading her name and face far beyond California's borders. Yet despite the growing net, Lauren remained elusive, a master of vanishing. But even the best fugitives must eventually face the consequences of their actions. The hunt for Lauren was far from over. It had only just begun. 4 years, Lauren Austin lived like a shadow. The world moved on. The headlines faded. But for those who loved Linnell Barsock, the wounds never closed. While the case went cold on the surface, it was never forgotten. Lauren had vanished after the murder, crossing into Texas, then Belize, adopting a new identity, settling into a quiet life far from the eyes of American justice. She worked under a false name, kept a low profile, moved from place to place. No fingerprints. No online presence. No phone records. She became a ghost. But ghosts leave traces. And then, after nearly 5 years in hiding, a tip came in. Authorities received word that a woman matching Lauren's description was living in Belize, quietly working in the city of Punta Gorda. Local law enforcement was alerted. The FBI got involved. Surveillance was set up. Quietly. Carefully. They tracked her movements, confirmed her identity, and built the operation. When the moment came, it was swift. Belizean officers approached without fanfare. She didn't run. She didn't fight. She knew it was over. After half a decade on the run, Lauren Austin was finally in custody. Her arrest marked the end of a global manhunt and the beginning of justice. She was extradited to the United States, where she would face charges for the cold-blooded killing of Linnell Barsock. The courtroom would be her next destination. But in that moment, cuffed, exposed and finally named, the woman who had vanished thought to be untouchable was finally cornered by the truth. 5 years after Linnell Barsock was found dead in her garage, the case finally reached its day in court. Lauren A. Austin, who had once shared a home and a life with Linnell, now sat in the defendant's chair. Her hands no longer carried texts. Her voice no longer whispered secrets. In that courtroom, she was no longer the friend, no longer the confidant. She was simply the accused. The trial took place in a Los Angeles County courtroom in 2015. The state called it premeditated, calculated, a crime driven by obsession and carried out in cold blood. Prosecutors presented a timeline built from digital forensics, phone records, email metadata, and expert testimony. They showed how Lauren A. had staged the crime scene, sent anonymous emails from an IP address linked to her device, and tried to shift the blame onto Linnell's new boyfriend. The jury listened as the prosecution detailed how Lauren A. had exploited trust, taken intimate photographs of Linnell's body, and used them in a twisted attempt to frame someone else. The courtroom was tense, silent, every breath, every glance, heavy with weight. Friends of Linnell testified to Lauren A.'s jealousy, how she hated seeing Linnell with someone new, how her mood would darken at the mention of another man. One witness called it possessive love. Another called it dangerous. But it was the digital trail that sealed the case. Files that had been deleted, but not destroyed. Metadata that revealed when and where the email was sent. IP logs that placed Lauren A. at the digital scene of the crime. Lauren A. Austin chose not to testify in her own defense. She remained quiet through most of the proceedings, barely reacting, even as her former life unraveled in front of her. The defense argued emotional instability, that Lauren A. had snapped, and this was not something planned. But the evidence said otherwise. After several days of testimony and only 2 hours of deliberation, the jury returned with a unanimous verdict. Guilty of first-degree murder. Guilty of attempted framing. And for that, the judge handed down a sentence both heavy and final. 2 consecutive terms of 25 years to life. Lauren A. would spend the rest of her life behind bars. No possibility of parole. But no sentence, no verdict, could ever bring Linnell back. In court, her family spoke through tears. A mother describing the ache of silence in her home. A father clutching the graduation photo of a daughter whose future was stolen. A brother asking the questions so many had thought but never voiced. How can you kill someone you said you loved? They remembered Linnell not as a victim, but as a force. A woman who gave her heart freely. Who dreamed big. Who wanted to heal others. As the courtroom emptied, justice had been served. But grief lingered in every corner. A friend. A lover. A killer. How did no one see it coming? Long after the trial ended, after the headlines moved on, after the court transcripts were filed and forgotten, Linnell Barsock's family remained in the silence that comes after violence. The kind of silence that fills a house where laughter used to live. The kind that clings to the walls, even after the lights are off. Her mother, Cheryl, has spoken in interviews about the grief no parent is built to bear. She says there are moments, still, when she hears Linnell's voice. In a quiet room. In an old voicemail she can't delete. In dreams that feel too real to forget. Some days, it's as simple as a memory triggered by a scent, perfume left in a drawer. Other days it's unbearable. A missed phone call she'll never get back. A dinner table with one chair that never moves. The grief didn't leave with the sentencing. It didn't end when Lauren A. Austin was locked behind bars. Because justice may be served in court, but it doesn't heal the soul. Linnell's family holds onto her life, not her death. They speak about the bright, ambitious young woman who became a nurse to help people. About the daughter who would call every Sunday night just to say she was okay. About the sister who gave the best advice. Who always showed up, no matter what. They talk about her graduation, the pink dress, the big smile, the proud tears. They remember her dancing in the kitchen with the radio too loud. singing off-key, laughing like she had nothing to fear. They cling to the life she lived, because the way she died was never who she was. At her memorial, friends came from all over. Some hadn't seen her in years, but they remembered her light, a kind of warmth that stayed with people long after she walked away. Her grave has become a quiet place of pilgrimage. Her mother still visits, sometimes with flowers, sometimes with questions that will never be answered, but always with love. They speak to her still, not because they expect her to answer, but because her absence is loud, and speaking to her makes the silence hurt a little less. To those who knew her best, Linnell Barsock is not a news story. She is not just a name in a trial. She is still a daughter, still a friend, still a soul stitched into the fabric of their lives. She is not gone. She is simply not here. What would you do if someone you trusted, someone you let into your life, your home, your heart, was secretly plotting to end it all? Would you recognize the signs? Could you? Linnell Barsock saw Lauren Austin as a friend, a roommate, a person she once loved. But behind that closeness was a darkness no one saw coming. So ask yourself, could this happen to someone you love? Could it happen to you? Would you believe it if the person smiling next to you was hiding a deadly secret? Let us know in the comments. Would you have suspected Lauren? Would you have seen the red flags? Do you think this tragedy could have been stopped? And if you found yourself in Linnell's shoes, what would you have done differently? These questions don't have easy answers, but sometimes asking them is the first step to protecting the people we care about. Because the hardest truth of all is this: sometimes the greatest danger comes from the people standing right beside you. Subscribe for more stories like this, true stories, a betrayal, and of lives changed forever.